Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of This New Classroom. Today we are going to take a look at building and site layout. As you can see behind me here, we got snow last night. So we are going to head inside and just do a short little mock-up going over this process. So all we need to do to get started with doing a site layout is have our plans so that I know the dimensions. This is where the site plan is going to be important, so I know all of my setback information. And then I need to have two different measuring devices. This example, I'm just showing you two 12-foot tape measures. You're not going to be able to use these if we're actually laying out a real building. We're just going to be doing a small little demonstration where we're dealing with inches instead of feet. You need to know what your dimensions are to make sure that you have the appropriate size tape measure. In most cases, you're going to probably need to have at least a 50-foot tape measure or maybe even 100-foot. And you're going to have two of those, and we'll see why in a little bit. Then we'll need to have some type of pin to drive into the ground. For this example, I'm just going to use a little 1.5" screw because our ground is being represented by a piece of styrofoam. We would need to have either a wooden or a metal stake that I would pound into the ground so that really holds my position. And then lastly, all I need is just a basic string line. This is to allow me to go from one point to another so that I have a visual representation of where the edge of that building needs to be. So this is a very low-tech, simple way to lay out a building. There are a lot of cool tools out there today that make this maybe a little bit easier and incorporate a lot of technology. But with that technology comes an increase in cost. So here, with just a very minimal investment, I have a pretty much foolproof way to lay out my site. So the first thing we need to do is establish our building line. That's typically going to be from the front of the property line, so where the main street is at. And that front building line, that is where the front of that building is going to be in relation to where the edge of the property line is. So for this example, we're going to use a 4-inch setback from the, we'll call this the front property line. So I'm just going to measure from that distance at 4 inches. And it doesn't really matter where I put this, so then we'll come to a different point from that predetermined property line and pound in that stake at 4 inches. Then we're going to take our string line and run that across both of the stakes. And now where that string is at is representing our build line. And we'll just label that as BL, the building line. So that tells me that is where the front of the building needs to go. From there, I'm going to start locating the 4 corners of my building. So I need to know what my setback is from the sides of the property line. In this case, we'll be going off of the right-hand side, and that setback is 6 inches. So we would, from this property line, measure in 6 inches, even with the string line or the front building line that we just created. Again, we drive a stake in at that location. So now this is going to be point A. To determine point B, that's very simple. I'm just going to measure from point A on my building line to determine what that distance needs to be. For this example, we are going to use 20 inches. So I'm going to measure over 20 inches on that string line, and that is point B. So now I have the front of my building established. So now that I have point A and point B established, now I need to figure out point C and point D. This could be a little bit more confusing because I'm not just measuring straight line off of a given reference. So in this example, we're going to say point C is 12 inches down from point A. Now I cannot just go from point A and measure 12 inches down and say, hey, there is point C. Because I could run into the issue of drawing a line, it's the right distance, but it's not square. I want the corner of my building to be square or at a 90-degree angle between this wall and that wall. So now, thinking back to math class, when you're sitting there, when am I ever going to use this? You probably heard of the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So you are going to use and apply math all the time when it comes to building. So listen to your math teacher. So now when I do that math, I figure out 20 squared plus 12 squared. That gives me 254, or 244, excuse me. Find the square root of 544. I have 23.323807579.4. So that tells me that my diagonal is 23. We'll kind of simplify that a little bit. We'll go to 4 decimal places. So I know it's 23.3238 inches. Now where in the heck do I find that decimal point on the tape measure? Well, I can take that decimal and multiply that times 16 because there are 1/16ths of an inch, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to convert this decimal into whatever 1/16th of an inch. So I bring that number times 16, I get 5.18. So that tells me that I have slightly over, but it's close enough, 5/16ths of an inch. Again, it's going to be slightly bigger, but now we're getting into like the 32nd or 64th of an inch, and we're talking so small that you're not going to notice that. So I know that my diagonal measurement is going to be 23 5/16ths of an inch. So back here on our model, we are going to use that information that we just figured out to determine point C. So from point A, I'm going to measure 12 inches down. This is now where I need to have 2 different tape measures. From point B, that diagonal I just found, 23 5/16ths of an inch, I'm just going to adjust both of those tape measures until my 2 measurements intersect. And right now I have the 12-inch line here and the 23 5/16ths meeting up. That's telling me at that point I have a 90-degree angle. And that now becomes point C. This outlined area is going to be where that building is going to sit. That's important to have this layout done properly because I can't go out to that build site and just plop that building down wherever I want it to be. In most cases, there is going to be that required setback from the front of the property line and then each of these sides. The last thing I want to do before I actually move forward is double check. We never want to assume that it's done right the first time. We always want to go through and double check all of our measurements. Double check to make sure that my building is square. I'm going to measure the diagonal. I measure from point B down to point C. I have 23 and 5/16. Now I'm going to repeat that from point A down to point D, 23 and 5/16. So that tells me that that building layout is done correctly and that I am square. I can move ahead with starting to dig the foundation. One detail that we will have to do that is going to be very difficult to demonstrate here in this example, so we'll just link a different video for you to watch, is to establish a batter board. So right now I have my pins at each of the four corners. That's telling the excavation contractor when they come in to dig that hole, everything in that rectangle needs to get dug out, or just along that line, depending on the type of foundation that you're dealing with. Well, the problem gets to be when I go to dig here at point C, I need to dig right on that line, or a little bit beyond. Once I dig that out, that pin is not going to be there anymore. If I were to extend my AC line, where that goes on the batter board, and then same thing with my DC. So then after it's all said and done, I can hook a string line from this point on my batter board to the one over on the other side, and then go from each of my points where the two strings are going to intersect is going to be where that point C is located. Again, check out the video link talking about batter board. So I hope you have a better understanding of how to do a site layout. And it's the same process if I'm doing a new house, new construction where I'm on a bare lot. If I'm doing an addition or adding a deck to an existing house, a sidewalk or a concrete patio, anything like that. Regardless of what I am doing, I need to use this process to make sure that that is appropriately laid out. And when the project is done, whatever it is I'm doing is ending up in the correct location. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.